Welcome back to my YouTube channel and podcast, Wonders and Miracles, where we get to celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, and I'm so happy to have you join me today as we talk with Doug and Tamra from Oregon about Doug's journey with COVID pneumonia. While we heard so many statistics about the death toll of COVID, we often didn't get to hear about the miracles that were also occurring. After a month of Tamra not being able to see Doug and Doug spending nearly 2.5 months in the hospital with many complications, including a stroke, blood clots that caused bleeding on the brain, and discovering a hole in Doug's heart, he miraculously returned home. Doug has been referred to as the Harney County's miracle man, and I'm so excited to hear all the miracles that took place to preserve Doug's life during this difficult time. But before we jump into this episode, if you love miracle stories and want to hear more, hit the like and subscribe button so you can catch all the inspiring and uplifting episodes of real people sharing real miracles. So Doug and Tamra, thanks for being here, and go ahead and share with us your COVID journey and the miracles that took place at this time.
Thank you for having us on this podcast. A year ago, last September 15th, it just happened to be our 31st wedding anniversary. My husband, Doug, and I, we had COVID, and he just kept progressively getting sicker and sicker. And so that evening on our anniversary, my father-in-law, because I was still sick, took Doug to our local hospital. In the middle of the night, I got a call from the doctor telling me that they were going to life flight him to Bend, which that's the next biggest town. It's 2 hours away. And she said, you better come to the hospital so you can be with him for a little bit before they life flight him. So my father-in-law picked me up and he took me to the hospital, and I was there with him probably about 4 hours before they eventually got him to Bend.
What a way to spend your anniversary, right?
Right.
So sorry.
Yeah, no, we didn't celebrate it at all.
Well, that was miracle number one, that I even went to the hospital, because I had already gone earlier and was pretty much sent away because I didn't have a shot and they didn't treat me very nice. The doctor on call there was kind of a jerk to me.
Because you hadn't had the vaccine?
Right.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So I didn't want to go back very bad after that. And there was a friend of mine that worked there, said, come back in. I will not let them turn you away. Yeah. I went back.
Yeah. So it just so happened, I think this was a tender mercy, or at least I believe it was. After my father-in-law took him in that night, I was at home, and I just happened to be a lady on Instagram. I was reading her story of her father passing away, and she was sharing with her followers some certain things to look out for when your loved one is put in the hospital. There was a certain medication, remdesivir, and she said, don't let them give that to your loved one in the hospital. And I'm telling you, this whole COVID thing, so much prayer and fasting was put in many of our decisions. It was not something I've taken lightly. Anyway, so that night, this follower on Instagram said, don't let them have remdesivir. So I get to the ER and I put in that room with my husband, and the doctor on call, which was a nice doctor, different from the one he had originally. She was hooking a bag of something up, and I asked her what it was, and she said, oh, it's remdesivir. And she explained that it would help. And it's like my jaw dropped, and I was like, I don't feel good about that. And luckily she asked me why, and I politely told her why, and she listened to me and she respected our decision. And Doug also said, yeah, we'll take our chances. And so she respected our wishes. There was a nurse in the room when I declined remdesivir for him, and she turned around and she was telling me she respected that I was having a voice and telling her what I wanted for him or what I didn't want for him. And it was so nice to have a good doctor and a good nurse who were respectful of us and our choices. And to me, that was a tender mercy. And I appreciated it so much.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I love that you saw that just in time, right? That I love how I see that as a miracle, God orchestrating information to come to you in your time of need.
And I really, truly felt that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that.
So they life flighted him to Bend. He was put in the progressive care unit for a week and a half, and he wasn't making any progress. So a week and a half later, I get a call in the middle of the night. My phone wasn't even on. It was on the floor. And I just so happened to hear the buzzing, and I answered the phone, and it was a doctor telling me that they were going to put him in the ICU on a ventilator. And when I heard that, I was like, oh man, this is really, really serious. And it was so frightening. It was in the middle of the night. I think it was like 2:30 in the morning. And I knew that everyone was asleep. So I sent out a text to close family, and I said what was going on. But one thing I did want to share that's a very special thing is when I got that call, and they did put Doug on the phone to let me know that he knew what was going to be happening. When I got that call, I was like, there is nothing I can do. Like, it was in God's hands. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't be with my husband this whole time. I was 2 hours away from him in Burns. And I got on my knees right then, got out of bed. I got on my knees and I just said a prayer. And I called on all of the men that my husband knew, that we both knew, that had passed away. And I called on them specifically, and I pictured each one of their faces. And I actually said their names out loud in my prayer to have them come forward and put their hands on my husband's head and give him a blessing of healing. There was nothing I could do. And so I called on so many men. And then I thought, now did I get everybody? And I thought I had. But in the little bit of time that I slept that night, which wasn't very much time, I had a dream that I was telling somebody that I said this prayer and was calling all of these men. And then Doug's uncle Bruce, who was a very special uncle to Doug, he loved him. He was a great man. He passed away, and he was the one man that I forgot to call his name to come forward and give him a blessing. And so in that dream, it's like Uncle Bruce said, wait, you didn't call on me. And so it made me wake up. I woke up, and then I said a prayer, and again out loud, I said his name to come forward and give Doug a blessing. And to me, there is no doubt in my mind that it was more than a dream. He wanted to be asked to come forward and give him a blessing. To me, that was a miracle.
That is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
so powerful. I love that story so much because I feel like we should do that more often.
Exactly.
Call on our ancestors to come and help us. I love it.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I don't know if people know that, and I think some people think that, oh, Heavenly Father, he's over the whole world. You know, how could he listen to my prayers? But he does. But maybe it would be more tangible, maybe for people to realize that you can call on your loved ones that have passed away. You truly personally know them, and you can call on them when you need help with something. And I felt so strongly to call on these men because I knew me here on earth, I couldn't do anything more for my husband, but I knew that those men could. I knew that I truly felt like they could be there in spirit and they could go to him and help him.
My mom's 5 brothers have been my heroes, and they've been slowly passing away. And 3 of them are the men that she called on. My Uncle Dennis, who just passed away a couple of years ago, we've had kind of a funny relationship back and forth, pranking each other all the time and doing kind of gross things to each other. when I was in the hospital, the bathroom was the hard thing to deal with, especially when I had lost a lot of my functions.
Yeah.
And having to deal with that was embarrassing and hard to do. He actually, out of all the men that have passed away that I would have been comfortable with, he's the one that came and helped me through the bathroom breaks that I needed.
I love that. That is so special. I think this is amazing and so sacred to have these relatives come and help you in spirit.
Yes, definitely.
I love this topic so much and this idea, and I think we should utilize it more. I had read a man, he had a near-death experience and wrote in his book that he felt impressed to ask angels to pray for him. And he didn't have specific family members that he was thinking of. And he was actually a medical man, agnostic, didn't really believe in God, didn't know what he believed in, but he felt very impressed to ask angels to pray for his well-being. And that stuck with me so much that I thought, why don't we do that more often?
Definitely. Yeah. And I was so worried about him being alone during this time. Nobody by his side. And so that's why I felt so strongly that I want people to be by his side. And what better people than loved ones that have passed away, that they can be there.
Yeah. Doug, did you feel their presence while you were in the hospital?
Yeah, there are certain times where I really felt a lot of my friends and my loved ones were around me. One friend in particular that passed away 10 years ago. I felt him quite a few times, and he, I think, was one of the ones that was telling me that you can't give up. Your time's not done yet.
So while Doug was in the ICU on the ventilator, we were able, usually every evening, we were allowed to talk to him. So the nurse on call would call us on her iPad and put the iPad next to him and told us, go ahead and talk to him. He can probably hear you. And so we just talked to him and we told him to keep fighting and to not give up, and that we're all here and we love him. And so that was it was a very hard thing, especially the nurses would prepare us. And it was hard because there were tubes coming out of him and he was completely out. That was difficult, but we were grateful that the nurses were so kind. And that was another thing I wanted to talk about. This whole experience, we had such good nurses and doctors. They were amazing. And someday
a lot of them were traveling doctors and nurses. So I got to meet people from all over the United States and country. Even I had a couple nurses from Mexico. One really special experience that I had, she came in after I had been awake for a little while and told me that she had been caring for me. And I remembered a lady that had come in and would sing to me. She sang in Spanish, but I could understand everything.
Yes, we were just so grateful for all of the good, kind people that truly cared. You felt that they weren't just doing their job, but they truly cared.
I had a doctor who was a member of our church. He was able to come in and give me a blessing, and he left me with a picture of Jesus Christ that his mom and dad had gotten in Jerusalem. So it was pretty special. And I haven't got to see him since I got out of the hospital. Because he was a doctor, he was allowed to come into my room and give me that blessing. And it really meant a lot to me.
I talked to him on the phone prior and I gave him, information about Doug. And then he was able to go in and give him a blessing. And that was so appreciated. And
which is that another tender mercy that no one was allowed to come and see you. The fact that he was a doctor was the only reason he was able to do that. And
right.
I love that. Mm-hmm.
While he was in the ICU, we had gotten a call from the doctor. He gave us the very grave news that I just will never forget his words. He is very, very sick and he has a very, very low chance of survival. when I heard those words, of course, my heart dropped, and thinking, wow, I never saw this coming in life. And do we ever see these things coming? Right. No, we don't. But I didn't know what to say to that. I was also blessed because I had one of my daughters staying with us at the time. And when I would get these calls, you're feeling all of these emotions, but you're also trying to take in what the doctors are telling you. A lot of them are like medical terms or medicines that they're using. And I was so grateful that my daughter was right there. She had her phone and she was texting everything. And she's very good about that. And so she was just like dictating everything that the doctor we would put the phone on speaker. And so she just like was texting everything, because we then would pass all of that information on to family and friends that were so worried about Doug and praying for him. And I also wanted to add that during this time, we had so many people praying for Doug and fasting for him, and people that I didn't even know, people that we hadn't talked to in years and years. It was during that time that we started up a Caring Bridge account about Doug's story. That way people were able to read the daily updates my daughter would put on that site. And that was so helpful for people, because they knew then what to specifically pray for. And she would say that with each daily update, please pray that Doug's lungs will heal. We were told that his lungs were very whited out at one time, which, back then I didn't know. And now I know that when your lungs are whited out, that's a very serious thing. And so people would be able to pray specifically for certain things each day when they would get an update. So that was helpful.
Some of the things that I remembered when I was out, when they would say, she said she was talking to us, FaceTiming or whatever. I don't remember seeing a lot of things, but I remember hearing voices. And some of these things came back to me after I had been home. Like I would dream about stuff and I would realize, okay, that happened to me. Those are real. A lot of people sent messages and stuff, and they would play those things for me. And I remember in my mind hearing my friends' voices and people. And I'm wearing this Rocky shirt because I grew up with that. A lot of my life's lessons were learned from Rocky stories and
the Rocky movies.
The movies, yeah. I remember thinking to myself while I was under that all of the things that I have taught, I coached wrestling, football, and little kids for years. That's been one of my passions. And so I always use stories, that would inspire them to be tough. And so as I was fighting for my life, I kept reminding myself, you're going to look like the biggest hypocrite in the world if you can't beat this, to all those kids that you've tried to inspire to be tough. So I just kept fighting. I remember one specific time that was really hard. I know that I was fighting for my life because I would feel like I couldn't breathe, and I would throw my head back and almost like I was convulsing. I remember a woman coming to me and telling me, you fought hard enough, just give it up. And then I remember that my wife and my mom both were there and told that woman, he wasn't raised like that, get out of here, and sent her on her way. That was one of the times that I felt like I could have easily given up and been done, but I didn't. It was because of all these stories that I shared beforehand, and never give up. Some of the guys that I coached with, they made a video of my high school football team that I coached, and they were all chanting for me to go fight, win type of stuff. I even had my brother that was coaching the little kids team. They had football helmets put on the back of them, win, Doug, win. So I had lots of little inspirational things to keep fighting.
I love that.
There was a time where I don't know for sure who it was, but I felt like it was maybe somebody that was in charge of the afterlife had come and told me that the chances were strong that I would probably I might not survive this and that I needed to make a decision. They said that I could either survive and it would be tougher for me, or I could give up and be there with them. I remember telling them I want to live. And I remember also that they said something like, you could be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. I had an aunt, when she was 19, she suffered a stroke and was paralyzed and in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. And I grew up with her here on the ranch. She was with my grandparents her whole adult life. She had a pretty nice life. I mean, she was happy. We played cards with her all the time. And she went to all of my football games. And I remember thinking, I can't just give up because I might be in a wheelchair. She said a really good example for me that life goes on, even if you got to suffer a little bit. And so when I had that decision to make, I said, I don't care. I can live in a wheelchair, but I want to live. And so I kind of knew that I might not be whole, but that was okay with me.
That's incredible. I was going to ask you that if you had a near-death experience, which is what that's called when you get to visit the other side. And did you have more experiences on the other side, or was that just the only moment that you remember?
That's the moment that I remember. I mean, I was constantly feeling like I was back and forth. And there was times where I felt like I was moving around the country. Yeah, I know that I was out of my body. I mean, I feel like I was at a football game a couple of different times that I was actually not at home. I feel like those were near-death type experiences. Some of them could have been dreams, but a lot of them felt so real. And I still have, like, there were some really nice things, but there was some really scary things as well.
I think because you were so sick.
Probably because I was so sick, because I had like experiences where I was actually in World War II and seeing some things that happened and really scary things. And I don't know for sure what that was all about.
Here's a theory. And you could have been experiencing your ancestral trauma, meaning the stuff that you brought in from your ancestors that your body was trying to like clean up. Because I've heard that a lot, like the hearts of the fathers turning to their children, like we can do the work for our ancestors sometimes, but we inherit stuff that we bring in. I don't know. That's just, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Well, some of the things that I saw were like when the Japanese had prisoners and the torturing things that they did. Yeah. And I did have an uncle who was caught by the Japanese.
Really? That's fascinating. My husband had a dream. Now we're just going to get weird. I love all this weird stuff. I love all things spiritual. My husband had a dream one night of his grandfather. He was in World War I and he was in the trenches. And my husband was his grandfather. Like in his dream, he was experiencing everything that his grandfather had experienced. And he woke up in like a cold sweat and panicky, like I was just in the war. And I know exactly what it was like. I knew exactly what it felt like. And anyway, I do think sometimes we carry that DNA within us, those memories. So interesting.
Thank you. Yeah. So as he was coming out of sedation from being on the ventilator, Doug was in the ICU on the ventilator for a week and a half. And as they were taking him out of sedation, they noticed that he had suffered a major stroke that paralyzed his left side. We just thought, well, here we go again, because that doctor that had told us that he's very sick and in so many words that he might not make it. A few days later, he said that he was cautiously optimistic, and then he suffered the major stroke. We couldn't tell until he was completely awake how badly the stroke affected him, but it did paralyze his left side. We again asked people, please pray. And it was October 4th that we were told that Doug had suffered the major stroke while we were FaceTiming you. I think all of us said to you that Rocky quote, it ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you get hit and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. And that's one of the quotes that we love, and it can apply to life. At this time, we had all of the family. When we knew that we were going to be FaceTiming Doug, family would come over and be in the living room with us. You know, I would hold the phone up, and we would all say something positive and uplifting and keep fighting. And even at that time, you were already being called Harney County's Miracle Man. And because you had gotten better from initially being told that you were maybe not going to make it.
Yeah.
From October 4th, when he suffered the stroke, to October 11th. So during that time that he had suffered the stroke, the doctors discovered that he had a hole in his heart that was probably present since birth. And it's usually, it closes up on its own, but it didn't close up. And that allowed the blood clots, like from his lungs, his legs, to travel up. And so that's what caused the stroke. He had the surgery on October 11th, where they went through his groin and they put in a filter, and they were able to repair the hole in his heart. That was the day that me and my daughter traveled to Bend, 2 hours away. And that was the first day that I was able to see him, right after he got finished with that surgery. And they had him back in the progressive care unit. And it was my turn, and I got to go in and see him. I guess we need to add this too. So at the time at the St. Charles Hospital, the only way that a visitor could see a patient is if they had the COVID vaccine. I have always been a very obedient and compliant person. I never drank. I never did, like my parents said, I was the oldest of 7. They always said, wow, that's why we kept having kids. Because you were just so easy. And when this whole thing came about with COVID and getting the vaccine and that push, all of my kids got their vaccinations, so it wasn't like I was anti-vax. I prayed about it. I fasted about it. And I specifically, in my prayers, I would say, please bless me to have the gift of discernment. Yes. Please help me to know whether or not to get this vaccine. Every time I thought about it, okay, I'll get the vaccine, I put in the effort to hear him regarding whether or not to get the vaccine. And really, a lot of the time, when you have your spouse with you, kind of what one spouse feels, the other one will feel the same way. Then when he got sick, then I kind of second guessed myself, like, here I am, felt so strongly. And normally your husband kind of supports what you do. So he didn't believe in the vaccine either. And then
I may have prayed a little bit about it, but mostly because somebody was telling me I had to do something. And
that's his nature.
My nature is no.
So at the time when we both got COVID, and then he especially kept getting worse and worse, then I was thinking, anyway, you just kind of second guess yourself. Yeah. Now where we are at now, I feel like I had those feelings like, no, to get the vaccine for a reason. And I feel now that maybe if he would have gotten the vaccine, if we just said, okay, we'll get the vaccine, maybe he wouldn't be here today, because you hear stories of people that have blood clots and they just die. And maybe
I would have had it when I
especially
wasn't in the hospital.
Yeah.
With the hole in his heart, even.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he could have gotten the vaccine, and he could have been one of those that dropped dead. At least this was while he was in the hospital. They discovered that he had the stroke and the hole in his heart. And so to me, I'll never know. We'll never know that. But I would like to think that my strong convictions against getting the vaccine maybe benefited him too. I mean, it's much better off to be in the situation he's in right now than to not have him with us.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you feel like discovering that hole in his heart was sort of a miracle as well, so that they could catch that and help repair that? Because sometimes that goes undetected, right? For your whole life, it had gone undetected.
Yeah. What is it called? A PFO?
Yeah.
Yeah, PFO. And in this situation, I am grateful that they found it and were able to take care of it. And, he was being closely monitored, and what better place to discover it then instead of maybe it being too late. So again, I had chosen not to get the vaccine, but St. Charles hospitals, they said if a visitor wants to come and see a patient, they have to be vaccinated. And when I heard that, it was a no-brainer. I was going to get the vaccine. So I got the vaccine and I didn't even think twice about it. I didn't look into it. I just knew it's like, okay, I will get it for my husband so I can see him. A no-brainer. And so I got the vaccine and then I was cleared to be able to go visit him. I had a reason to get it. That's when it made sense to me. So again, when I first got to see him after about a month, they had just put him back in the hospital room after getting the filter put in and the hole in his heart closed. And I just always remember just going in, and he was laying in his bed. The room was dark. He was looking up at the ceiling and his mouth was hanging open. And it was just so different from a month earlier, to see my husband in that situation. And that was really hard. And I was able to spend a day with him. And then my daughter was able to spend the next day with him. And we were so blessed because a couple in our church they were so kind to us, and they had made their house available for us. They had a few empty bedrooms and we were able to stay there. I was able to spend about 3 weeks in Bend. And at that time, different family members would take turns visiting him. And so he had his mother there one day, his dad,
brother-in-law,
your children, everyone got to take a turn and spend a whole day with him. And that was so wonderful. And we had each person that spent a day with him, they were the one then that was supposed to write or send us the update. And it was wonderful because it was in their words and their perspective, and just so special that they each got to take that special time with him. One funny thing I want to share is that, so I'm someone who I get nauseated or nauseous, maybe that's the word, over everything. Like I don't like needles. I don't like blood. I don't like to, gross things. I can't even make myself watch a show that has an operation in it or something. I just get grossed out over things like that. So when I would spend time with him, he had a lot of like phlegm and junk that would come up from his lungs, and whoever was with him that day would have to help him suction all of that junk out of his mouth.
I would cough it up.
And then on the wall is the clear container that shows all that stuff. And it was so gross. And so I realized, and I didn't realize it initially, but I realized, oh my gosh, how am I able to do this to suction phlegm out of my husband's mouth? And I thought, I have come a long way.
I didn't realize how much I loved my wife and how incredibly strong she was for me and all the things that she went through. I mean, yeah, I was struggling with my life, but I would have much rather done that because that's just a physical thing than went through what she went through. I've called her my Wonder Woman.
I love that. It is true. It's so both perspectives have their own unique challenges and struggles. And sometimes it is harder to watch someone suffering than to be the one suffering through it.
Yeah, I would much rather suffer than to watch somebody suffer. One of the things that is the hardest for me now is not the struggle that I have trying to fix my left side, but not being able to do things for others. That's been tough. We were in Texas and there was a man that kind of collapsed in the restaurant we were in, and I couldn't jump up and run over and help him. And it killed me. Even just little things like on the airplane, a lady having a hard time getting her suitcase up, I'd have been right there and put it up, but I couldn't anymore.
What are your physical lasting symptoms? Are you in a wheelchair? Is your left side still paralyzed?
So I went from, when I was in the hospital, I went from being packed around in a big sling,
Hoyer lift,
and having to move that way to eventually I was able to get up. They call it a Sarah steady.
Mm-hmm.
And I could grab onto it and pull myself up. And then they would wheel me around. They would wheel me around to wherever I needed to go. And then I went from that to a wheelchair. It was electric, but I kept bumping into the wall on the left side because I couldn't hardly even, I couldn't register things on my left side.
Yeah, his peripheral vision on his left side. And when I was with him or anyone was with him, you would have to tell him, you need to look to your left.
The physical therapist told me that I probably needed to get the house ready for a wheelchair. And I told them, I am not wheeling out of here. I will walk out of here. And so for the next 3 weeks, I just worked as hard as I could. Eventually was able to walk with a railing. And then I got a cane. When it came time to leave, I was able to walk pretty much. And steadily, I've been getting better at getting around. And I can now walk without a cane. I've got a brace on my leg, keeps my ankle from twisting. And I walk a little bit like Frankenstein, but I'm still walking.
But you're walking.
Yes.
That's a miracle. That's amazing.
So one of the days that his mother visited him in the hospital, you were able to lift up your left foot, and she just screamed with excitement and got a video of it. He lifted up his left foot, and there was hope that maybe he won't be truly, completely paralyzed and not be able to move it. But so that was just so exciting for everybody to see that. She got a video of it, and I think it was put on Facebook. And so that was so exciting to be able to see he can move his left leg. So that was great. It
made the physical therapist tear up when I saw that.
Yeah, it gives everyone hope. I love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. After all of this, he was put in the rehab unit of St. Charles Medical Center, and he was there for 3 weeks. That
was one of the other miracles, was that the head of the physical therapy unit rushed me through to get me into 3-week intensive physical therapy, they called it, where you would work 3 hours a day, every day, for 3 weeks. Usually they don't get people like me in there that early. But she said, with everything that I've seen and as fast as you're coming, we can do this. So I was able to get into that and then make the goal of getting home before Thanksgiving.
Which you did, yes. The head of the physical therapy or the rehab clinic was Dr. Josie Fitzsimmons, and she was incredible. She pulled strings to get him into the rehab clinic as soon as possible because she knew she could tell. And she had told us too that out of all of her years that she had been there, she had never seen anybody progress as quickly as he did. That felt good too.
And she said, keep praying and fasting and all of those things. She said, I've seen that work more than anything that doctors have ever done.
Coming from a doctor.
I love that. And I do believe in that power of prayer and fasting from when you have a community that is rallying and then adding on to your upbringing of that fighting spirit. I think that's just a beautiful combination. And I'm glad she sensed that and saw that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
All right. So yes, during this time that Doug was in the hospital, we had people that brought over meals to our family. We had people who came by and did anything that needed to be done. Doug's brother, Ryan, he had his kids come over and rake the leaves off the lawn and bag them up. Just so many kind people. There were a couple of people that sent him teddy bears in the hospital when he was in the ICU. Somebody sent him a teddy bear and we didn't even know who it came from. Found out later who it was from. But just people prayed, and we literally had thousands, and people we didn't even know who they were. And just so many people were so kind and so generous. And we were so grateful. And I know that that's what got me through. I could feel people's prayers for me too. And usually I can have a lot of anxiety. I mean, who wouldn't have anxiety over being in this kind of a situation? And I was able to just feel like calm and peace. I knew that no matter what happened, that things somehow would be okay. And I was so grateful for that, because I don't know how I would have been able to get through that.
In our temples, they have a temple prayer roll that you can request to put people's name on. And people told me that I was in so many different temples because I have friends from all over the world, even in Africa. I was in the temple prayer list in Africa.
I love that.
And like I was saying before, we were able to stay in this family's home in Bend, the Wilcoxes. They were so kind to us. And that was so grateful that we had a cozy home to come to at night after spending a day with Doug. And we were so grateful for that. And then when he was transferred to the rehab clinic, another family here that's our good friends let us use their camper. It was parked there on the hospital grounds, all hooked up. They got all hooked up for me. And
it was my friend Jay Wynn's family, his mom and dad.
At that time, it was me and then my mother-in-law, Gay. Her name is Gay. And we were staying in that. And then when she went home, it was just me. I think I was the one that was staying in there for 2 weeks. And so it was wonderful that I would go from spending the entire day with Doug at the rehab, and I would it was even within walking distance, and I could just go to the little camper at night and then come back the next morning. And so that was so nice that we didn't have to worry about paying for a hotel for 3 weeks, but had that little camper all to ourselves. And it was something that we were so grateful. I was so grateful to have that in this world that many times you hear about all of the negative things and all of the awful things that's going on. But in the situation that we found ourselves in, you learn that there still are great, wonderful people in the world. And it's just warms your heart to know that there's still great people. And you can focus on the good and you can focus on the bad, and the world throws all the bad at you and wants you to focus on that. But no, there is still good in the world if you look for it.
Yes. And that's why I love that you're sharing your story, because during the COVID years, that's all we heard was the bad stuff. And there were miracles and good, kind things going on all over. And I love too that you highlighted the doctors and the nurses. I mean, sometimes they get a bad rap, and they're so exhausted working so hard. Right. So I'm so grateful you had a good experience with the medical personnel as well.
Yeah, I had nurses that went way beyond what they needed to do. Instead of just doing what she needed to do, she would sit and talk to me about, you have to make some goals about what you want to do when you get home. Put a little more perspective into what I was going to be able to live for. Talked about my grandchildren. I had a blanket made from a good friend of ours that had pictures of all of my family, including my grandkids on it, which was also a huge inspiration. Also, I think it helped let doctors and nurses see what kind of a guy I was when they saw how many family members and kids and grandkids I had. That was wonderful too.
Yeah, that was about that blanket. That was such a wonderful idea. It was a friend of ours here in Burns, and she put together a collage. It was a blanket, but it was pictures in a collage and printed out on that blanket and had it sent to the hospital. And so he had this awesome, and it was a huge cozy blanket with all of Doug's loved ones on it. And so when nurses and doctors would come in, that right there was something to talk about, because they could see, oh, who's that? And then he was able to share who was in those pictures. And it also, I think, helped doctors and nurses see that he was more than just a patient right there, that they could see that he's a father and a husband and a grandpa and a friend and all of these things. And it was so wonderful. I highly recommend that for anybody who has somebody who's in the hospital for an extended period of time, or even who's someone who is at home and can't get out of the house, to have a blanket that has pictures of loved ones on it.
Well, I had pictures, collages of family members and football teams and me coaching and all of that kind of stuff that really helped too.
Yeah, poster boards that we just put pictures on it so he could see those things, and that helped him a lot.
Yeah.
We had a friend here in Burns that when we knew the date for when Doug was able to actually come home to Burns, which was November 23rd, 2021, 2 days before Thanksgiving. He had worked so hard in the rehab clinic. So our friends organized to have kids coming out of the schools. It was the high school, the middle school, the elementary school, and then friends and family lined the streets in our little town of Burns, Oregon, with banners and balloons. And it was such a special thing when we all got in the pickup and we were driving home, and to come into our town and just see the streets lined with all of the people who were invested in Doug. And Doug said before, he was a coach and he was on our school board here, and so many people knew him and loved and respected him, and he had given so much over the years, and it was so nice to see other people. That was their way of giving back. And even the principals of the schools got a hold of me and said, we would love for you to come by the school, the kids will be out. And we drove past all of those schools and down the main street, and people cheering him on, and we had our windows rolled down, and I was videoing, and we were all crying, and it was such a special and heartwarming thing. And it was so wonderful. And for everyone to see that their prayers, look, here he is. Harney County's miracle man is coming home. And it was amazing. It was very, very cool. And we were so grateful for that. And we had our shirts made. It says on the front, Gunderson Tough. And this is actually a picture, a silhouette of Doug. A few years ago, it was 2018, our family went on a vacation to Pennsylvania, and we went to Philadelphia, and we ran up the rocky stairs. And at that time, I have a video, Doug ran up the rocky stairs and, do what everybody does and puts their arms up in the air. And so this picture is from that. The back of our shirts say, you can read it, Doug.
It's the Rocky quote. It ain't all about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
That's how winning is done. Yeah. We feel like Doug won. He beat COVID. He beat the stroke, and he came home, and life is good. There's difficult days. Things look different. It's little different, little more difficult.
Also, I would like to mention that we had such a good bunch of people that donated money to help me pay for all these doctor bills. And it was enough that we didn't have to worry about it.
It was such a blessing. We were so grateful. We just can't thank people enough for their generosity and their love and their support.
There was a group of people that one of them was a boy that I coached in football when he was younger, and they got together an auction and made a bunch of money for me and came by during Christmas.
Aww. And they came in and they gave us an envelope of money, and it was very heartwarming. We also, during Christmas time, we had a couple of different families that came and sang to us. It was so heartwarming. People are good. People are amazing.
They are amazing. And I love that in your situation, Doug, you got to be the catalyst to invite that goodness out of people because of who you were, right? Like who you are. You had been such a strong part of that community, it sounds like. And I think it's beautiful that you got to see all of that all the people came together for you.
Yeah. When I got home, wrestling had started already. So one of the first things I got to do was go to a wrestling tournament in Burns. And I had a guy come up to me that wasn't a very spiritual guy ever. And he talked about how much that he has changed because of what I was going through. And those are the things that make this worth it.
I think it's beautiful how our lives touch each other in just beautiful and miraculous ways.
Yeah.
Again, because Rocky movies and different quotes out of the Rocky movies have been so inspiring for our family. I had an idea to surprise Doug, which I was able to pull off. And it was last month, I was able to surprise him. He thought we were flying to Florida to see our son and his wife, but instead we took a little detour and we flew to Philadelphia. and met my son and daughter-in-law there. And we were able to once again walk the rocky steps. And this time, obviously, it was different from before when he was able to run up. When we were there, he had the support of his sons and daughter walking up the rocky stairs. And my son even had the Rocky theme song playing on his phone, and he was able to walk up those rocky steps. They were right by your side. Lots of the time, they didn't even have to hold on to you. And he got up to the rocky stairs and 72 steps up, 72 steps down, and he was able to do it. And we have pictures and video of that. And to me, that trip was everything that
it was a really cool detour.
And how did it feel the second time to make it up those stairs?
Oh, that was a lot more than it did the very first time that I ran up them. Because I remember even in the physical therapy, they had like a wooden set of stairs that I practiced going upstairs. And when I got to the top of like 4 stairs, I raised my hand like Rocky.
Like I did it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was huge for me to be able to do that again.
So it was just a couple of months before he got sick. So he got sick in September, and June 19th, 2021.
I had an arm wrestling tournament in Bend that I went to, and I won my age group 40 and up, and then I got second in the overall, which is all ages, young guys. And I got beat by a California guy that was young and really strong, but I got second anyway. So my goal is now that I want to go back and do another tournament. So I've been working on it, and my sons both of them have become pretty good arm wrestlers. And my oldest son, when I was about 2 weeks out of the hospital, we have a family championship that I had won from my uncles that were so much into it. And so I had been the family champion for years. And my son beat me 2 weeks after I got out of the hospital and cried when he beat me. So on that Philadelphia trip, I got to arm wrestle him again, and I took the title back from him, and he was happy for me.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And I love that you've found ways to help motivate you to keep growing, to keep healing, to keep moving forward. I think that's important as well. Yeah.
And I still find things to keep me motivated to keep working hard.
A good message for everyone. If you've been knocked down,
yes.
How do you get back up again and keep moving forward?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I have loved your whole story, the journey that you went on, the miracles that you saw. It sounds like there were just some really powerful experiences that you had, that you learned from, that you were able to rally people around. It truly is beautiful to hear this. So thank you so much for sharing. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And there's still lots of opportunities that we continue to have. Every time a lot of times they'll just see me walking around, and I've been able to tell my story several times to people.
We have had a couple of experiences where they hear his story and they say a prayer for him right there. And it's like, we're so grateful for that.
Well, that's the
I've
feeling.
Been hugged several times by people I don't even know.
Well, that's the feeling I keep getting, going back to that near-death experience, that choice of you can stay or you can go, and you choosing to stay. It's like you're a walking miracle of this testament that God is real and that he loves us. And I think people can sense that or feel that. And I think that's a neat gift that you can offer to people and share that message with them. So I think that's really beautiful. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this miracle story. Please subscribe to my channel if you liked it. You can also find me on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. And remember to notice and celebrate miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.